Someone once told me that silence is the language of the truly powerful. I didn't understand what they meant until I watched a master negotiator sit through 20 minutes of aggressive accusations without saying a single word. When he finally spoke, everyone in the room leaned forward. That's when it clicked. The Stoics figured this out 2,000 years ago, and most of us still haven't learned it. We live in a world that demands explanations. Someone misunderstands your intentions, you rush to clarify. A colleague questions your competence, you defend yourself immediately. A stranger judges you online, you feel compelled to set the record straight. But what if the need to be understood is actually making you weaker? What if every time you explain yourself, you're giving away power you didn't even know you had? The ancient Stoics practiced something that seems almost impossible in our modern age. They let people misunderstand them, on purpose. Not out of arrogance or indifference, but from a deep well of inner certainty that made external validation irrelevant. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, wrote in his private journal that it's silly to expect bad people not to do bad things. He knew people would misinterpret his decisions, question his motives, and spread lies about his character. His response wasn't to launch a public relations campaign. It was to focus on his own integrity and let the noise fade into irrelevance. Here's what most people get wrong about Stoicism. They think it's about suppressing emotions or becoming cold and unfeeling. That's not it at all. It's about choosing where you invest your energy. And defending yourself against every misunderstanding is an energy drain that never stops. Because no matter how well you explain yourself, someone will always twist your words, project their insecurities onto your actions, or simply refuse to see your perspective. Think about the last time someone completely misread your intentions. Maybe they accused you of being selfish when you were actually setting a healthy boundary. Or they questioned your commitment when you were simply being strategic. Your immediate instinct was probably to explain, to justify, to make them see the truth. But did it work? In my experience, people who are determined to misunderstand you will find a way to do it no matter what you say. There's a specific kind of freedom that comes from releasing the need to be understood. It's not about becoming a hermit or cutting people off. It's about recognizing that your character is demonstrated through consistent action over time, not through verbal defense in the moment. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, which meant accepting that you can't control what others think about you. You can only control your own choices and integrity. Epictetus, who started life as a slave before becoming one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, taught his students a simple test. When someone criticizes you, ask yourself two questions. First, is this criticism accurate? If yes, then thank them for the feedback and improve. If no, then why does their false opinion matter? If your character is solid and your actions are aligned with your values, someone else's misunderstanding is their problem, not yours. But this isn't easy. Our brains are wired for social acceptance. Back when we lived in small tribes, being misunderstood could mean exile or death. That ancient wiring still fires today when someone thinks badly of us, even though the stakes are completely different. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between actual danger and social disapproval. It reacts the same way. That's why staying silent when misunderstood feels almost physically painful. The key is understanding what silence actually accomplishes. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you do three things simultaneously. First, you avoid the trap of over-explaining, which often makes you look guilty or insecure even when you're not. Second, you force the other person to sit with their assumptions instead of getting the satisfaction of an argument. Third, you preserve your energy for things that actually matter. I watched this play out with a friend who runs a small business. A customer left a scathing online review full of factual errors and personal attacks. His first instinct was to write a detailed rebuttal explaining everything the customer got wrong. Instead, he waited 3 days. By then, other customers had already responded, defending the business with their own positive experiences. His silence let the truth emerge naturally without him having to fight for it. When he did finally respond, it was brief and professional. The contrast between the customer's emotional tirade and his calm response told everyone watching everything they needed to know. This is the part where most people make a critical mistake. They confuse letting people misunderstand them with tolerating genuine harm or staying silent about injustice. Those are completely different situations. The Stoics weren't passive doormats. They were intensely engaged with the world and fought fiercely for what mattered. But they knew the difference between battles worth fighting and ego-driven needs for validation. So how do you know which is which? Start by examining your motivation. Are you speaking up because something genuinely important is at stake? Or because you can't stand the discomfort of being misunderstood? If it's the latter, that's your ego talking, not your wisdom. Your ego wants to be right, to be seen correctly, to win arguments. Your deeper self knows that none of that matters as much as maintaining your inner peace and focusing on what you can actually control. The challenge for the next few minutes is this. We're going to explore exactly why the Stoics developed this practice, what it looks like in real situations, and how you can start using it without becoming cold or disconnected. Because there's a specific technique to strategic silence that most people never learn. The technique starts with recognizing 3 categories of misunderstanding, each requiring a different response. Category 1. Trivial misunderstandings where nothing important is at stake. Someone thinks you're unfriendly because you didn't say hello when you were actually just distracted. A coworker assumes you're lazy because they didn't see the 4 hours of work you did before they arrived. These situations feel uncomfortable, but they're ultimately meaningless. The Stoic response here is simple. Do absolutely nothing. Don't explain, don't correct, don't even think about it after the moment passes. This is the purest form of strategic silence. You're not ignoring genuine problems. You're refusing to waste precious mental energy on other people's incorrect assumptions that have 0 real-world consequences. Category 2. Misunderstandings that could cause practical harm if left unaddressed. Someone believes incorrect information about you that might affect your job, your relationships, or your opportunities. These require action, but not the kind most people default to. Instead of defending yourself emotionally, you address it once, clearly without excessive justification. Then you stop. You've provided the truth. What they do with it is their choice. Marcus Aurelius handled this constantly as emperor. People regularly misunderstood his policies, his decisions, his character. He would clarify when necessary for the good of Rome, but he never tried to control whether people liked him or agreed with him afterward. He separated providing information from needing approval. Category 3. Deliberate misrepresentation by people trying to manipulate or harm you. This is where silence becomes most powerful, but also most counterintuitive. When someone is actively lying about you or twisting your words, every instinct screams to fight back immediately. Yet rushing to defend yourself often plays directly into their hands. They want you reactive, emotional, desperate to prove yourself. Your defensiveness becomes evidence of guilt in observers' minds. The strategic move is waiting until you can respond from a place of complete calm, often with actions rather than words. Let your behavior over time contradict their false narrative more effectively than any argument could. I saw this principle tested when a colleague faced false accusations at work. Someone claimed he'd taken credit for a team project, which wasn't true. His immediate impulse was sending a detailed email to everyone explaining exactly what happened. Instead, he waited 72 hours. During that time, 3 things happened naturally. First, other team members who knew the truth started speaking up without being asked. Second, the accuser's own reputation for exaggeration became apparent to others. Third, he gained perspective on what actually needed addressing versus what was just ego protection. When he did respond, it was brief, factual, and focused solely on the project's actual timeline. No emotional appeals, no attacks on his accuser, no over-explaining. The contrast between the drama of the accusation and the calm of his response told the real story. But here's what nobody tells you about strategic silence. It requires an entirely different kind of strength than defending yourself. Speaking up feels active, powerful, like you're doing something. Staying silent feels passive, like you're letting people walk all over you. That feeling is lying to you. True strength isn't proving you're right to everyone who doubts you. It's being so secure in your own character that you don't need their validation. Think about people you respect most. Do they constantly defend themselves and explain their actions? Or do they live with such integrity that their character speaks for itself? The latter, always. Nobody remembers or respects the person who argues about every misunderstanding. Everyone remembers the person who stays calm and consistent while others create drama around them. This connects to something deeper that the Stoics understood about human nature. People's opinions of you are based far less on facts than on their own internal state. Someone who's generally happy and secure will interpret your actions generously. Someone who's miserable and insecure will interpret the same actions suspiciously. You cannot control their internal state. You cannot argue someone out of a perspective they didn't reason themselves into. Their misunderstanding often has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what's happening inside them. When you recognize this, the desperate need to correct every wrong perception simply dissolves. There's a practical exercise that makes this real. For the next week, notice every time you feel the urge to explain yourself or correct someone's wrong impression. Before you act on that urge, pause and ask 3 specific questions. First, what's actually at stake here? Will this misunderstanding affect anything that matters in a week, a month, a year? Second, am I trying to change their mind about facts or about me? If it's the latter, you're probably wasting your time. Third, what would happen if I said nothing at all? Often the answer is absolutely nothing, or sometimes things would actually improve without your intervention. The philosopher Epictetus had students practice this by imagining criticism and insults before they happened, not to become paranoid, but to prepare their minds. He'd have them visualize someone calling them foolish, lazy, or incompetent, then practice responding internally with indifference. When the real criticism came, their minds were already trained not to react. This sounds cold until you understand what it actually creates. It's not about not caring what people think. It's about caring more about your own integrity than about managing everyone else's perceptions. Those are fundamentally different goals. Now the question becomes, how do you maintain relationships while practicing strategic silence? Because there's a version of this that turns you into an isolated, defensive person who never explains anything to anyone. That's not wisdom. That's just being difficult. The distinction matters enormously for what comes next. The key is understanding the difference between explaining yourself and defending yourself. Explanation comes from a place of clarity and service. Defense comes from insecurity and need. When someone you care about genuinely doesn't understand your decision, a calm explanation can strengthen the relationship. When someone's already decided you're wrong and just wants ammunition, explanation becomes defense and you've already lost. Here's how to tell the difference in real time. Genuine misunderstanding produces questions with curiosity behind them. I don't quite follow your thinking on this. Can you walk me through it? That's someone actually trying to understand. Compare that to accusatory questioning. So you really thought that was a good idea? What were you even thinking? That's not a question seeking information. It's a challenge wrapped in question marks. The first deserves your thoughtful response. The second deserves your silence. Your closest relationships can handle honest explanation without defensiveness. Here's why I made that choice is different from, you have to understand I had no choice because of these 17 factors beyond my control. One is confidence. The other is scrambling. People who truly know you don't need elaborate justification for every decision. They trust your judgment even when they might have chosen differently. But what about situations where staying silent could genuinely damage something important? A false accusation at work that might affect your career. A misunderstanding with a partner that's creating distance. A rumor in your community that's spreading. These aren't moments for absolute silence. They're moments for strategic precision. Address it once, clearly and calmly, with whoever actually matters. Not with everyone who has an opinion. Not with every person who heard the rumor. With the decision maker, the partner, the person whose perception actually affects your life. State the facts without emotion, then stop talking. The person who matters will either believe you or they won't. Multiple explanations won't change that. They'll just make you look desperate. There's a specific situation that trips people up constantly. Someone publicly criticizes you and staying silent feels like admitting they're right. Every instinct screams to defend yourself publicly, to set the record straight, to make sure everyone knows the truth. This is almost always a trap. Public defense of yourself creates a debate where none needed to exist. Now, instead of one person's opinion fading away naturally, you've amplified it by engaging. You've given it credibility by treating it as something worth your response. The exceptions are rare but real. If someone with actual authority or influence makes a false claim that will directly harm you if left unaddressed, then you respond, but only to that authority, not to the crowd. A false accusation to your boss requires a private conversation with your boss, not a company-wide email defending yourself. The latter makes you look guilty even if you're not. Now we get to something nobody wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand. Sometimes people will believe the worst about you regardless of evidence. Not because the evidence is convincing, but because believing the worst serves some need in them. Maybe it makes them feel superior. Maybe it justifies their own choices. Maybe they just enjoy drama. You cannot argue someone out of a position they need emotionally. Strategic silence in these cases isn't about the other person at all. It's about refusing to participate in a game you cannot win. This connects to a deeper principle about energy and attention. Every minute you spend defending yourself to someone who's determined to misunderstand you is a minute you're not spending building something meaningful. The opportunity cost of constant self-defense is staggering. Think about what you could create, learn, or accomplish with all the hours most people waste trying to control how they're perceived. The Stoics had a practice for this that sounds harsh but works remarkably well. They'd imagine their reputation being completely destroyed, every person thinking the worst of them, every achievement forgotten, every relationship severed. Not as a nightmare, but as a test. If that happened, what would remain? Your character, your actual skills, your real relationships with people who know you. Everything else is just noise. When you truly internalize that your worth isn't determined by public opinion, the need to defend yourself against that opinion simply evaporates. But here's where this gets interesting. The less you defend yourself, the more respect you actually gain from people worth respecting. There's something magnetic about someone who stays calm while others create chaos around them. It signals a kind of internal security that no amount of arguing could ever demonstrate. People unconsciously recognize the difference between someone who's right and knows it versus someone who's desperate to be seen as right. This doesn't mean you become a doormat. It means you choose your battles with ruthless precision. Is this worth my energy? Does this person's opinion actually matter? Will engaging improve anything or just create more noise? Most of the time, honest answers to those questions point toward silence. Not weak silence, not scared silence. Strategic, powerful silence that protects your peace and preserves your energy for what actually matters. There's one more layer to this that changes everything once you see it. The people who most desperately need you to defend yourself are usually the ones least worth convincing. Think about that. Someone secure in their judgment doesn't need you to perform for them. They form their opinion based on your consistent actions over time, not your ability to argue your case. The person demanding you explain yourself, justify your choices, prove your worth, they've already decided. They just want the satisfaction of watching you scramble. Don't give it to them, so what replaces the need to defend yourself when you finally let it go? something far more valuable: presence. Complete, unshakable presence in your own life. When you stop performing for an audience that doesn't matter, you suddenly have all this attention available for things that do. Your work improves because you're focused on excellence, not optics. Your relationships deepen because you're actually there instead of mentally rehearsing your defense. You start making decisions based on what's right, not what's defensible. That shift is everything. Most people are so busy managing their image, they never actually build anything worth having an image about. They're defending a facade while the foundation crumbles. You're doing the opposite, building something real while letting the facade take care of itself. Here's what actually happens when you stop defending yourself. First week feels uncomfortable. You'll catch yourself wanting to jump in, explain, correct the record. Resist that urge, notice it, acknowledge it, let it pass. Second week gets easier. You start seeing how much energy you've been wasting. All those imaginary arguments in your head, those perfect comebacks you'll never deliver, they start to fade. By the third week, something shifts. You realize you genuinely don't care what certain people think anymore. Not in a bitter way. You've just stopped giving them rent-free space in your mind. That's when the real freedom begins. People will test this new boundary. They'll make statements designed to provoke a response. They'll wait for you to defend yourself when you don't. They'll of 10 get more aggressive, trying to force the reaction they're used to getting. This is the critical moment. Hold your silence. Let them have their tantrum. Your calm is more powerful than any argument. What you're really doing is retraining everyone around you about what they can expect from you. The ones who respected you will respect you more. The ones who enjoyed pushing your buttons will eventually get bored and move on. Either outcome improves your life. But let's address the real fear lurking behind the need to defend yourself. You're worried that silence equals agreement, that if you don't argue against a false accusation, people will assume it's true. Sometimes they will. And you know what? Those people don't matter. Anyone who knows you will dismiss the accusation without needing your defense. Anyone who doesn't know you lacks the context to judge anyway. You're defending yourself to strangers and acquaintances whose opinions have zero impact on your actual life. Why? Think about someone you deeply respect. Not a celebrity, but someone in your actual life. How much time do you spend wondering what random people think about them? Probably none. You formed your opinion based on direct experience. That's exactly how people who matter will judge you. The rest is just noise you're choosing to listen to. There's a specific type of accusation that makes this harder. When someone accuses you of something you're actually insecure about, even if the accusation is false. That cuts deeper because it touches a nerve. Maybe you're insecure about your work ethic and someone calls you lazy. You're not lazy, but the accusation triggers your existing fear. Your instinct is to over-defend, to prove them wrong with excessive detail and justification. Don't. That action reveals the insecurity more than silence ever could. Instead, notice the insecurity. Acknowledge it privately. Ask yourself honestly whether there's any truth to address. If there is, address it through action, not argument. If there isn't, let it go. Your character is built through what you do when nobody's watching, not what you say when everybody is. Here's a practice that helps. When someone says something that makes you want to defend yourself, pause and take 3 full breaths before responding. Not quick breaths. Slow, deliberate ones. This does 2 things. First, it interrupts the automatic defensive reaction. Second, it gives you time to choose a response instead of being controlled by the trigger. Often, by the 3rd breath, you realize responding at all would be a waste of energy. Some of you are thinking this sounds exhausting. Constantly monitoring your reactions, choosing silence, letting things go. Isn't that just another form of emotional labor? What's exhausting is the alternative. Constantly defending yourself, managing everyone's perception, engaging in endless arguments that go nowhere. That's exhausting. This is liberating. You're not suppressing feelings. You're choosing not to act on every feeling that arises. Big difference. Suppression builds pressure. Conscious choice releases it. When you feel the urge to defend yourself and choose not to, you're not bottling up that energy. You're acknowledging it and redirecting it towards something useful. The ultimate test of this principle comes when someone attacks not just you, but something you've built. Your business, your art, your life's work. Now the stakes feel different because it's not just about you. It's about something you care deeply about. Even here, most defense is useless. If the criticism has merit, listen and improve. If it doesn't, your work will speak for itself. The market decides, not the critic. You defending your work rarely changes anyone's mind. The work itself, consistently excellent over time, is the only defense that matters. Every minute spent arguing with critics is a minute not spent improving what you've built. This is where we separate people who talk about their mission from people who live it. The talkers are always defending, explaining, justifying. The doers are heads down, building, improving, moving forward. Criticism slides off them not because they're arrogant, but because they're focused on something bigger than managing perception. They know something the defenders don't. Quality compounds faster than reputation. Build something genuinely valuable and reputation takes care of itself. Defend a mediocre reputation and you'll never have time to build anything valuable. So the question becomes, what would you do with all that energy if you stopped defending yourself? What would you build, create, or become if you redirected all those hours towards something constructive? That's the real question worth asking. Most people never ask it because they're too busy playing defense. They spend decades reacting to what others say instead of building what matters to them. Imagine the alternative. Someone criticizes you, and instead of spending 3 hours mentally rehearsing your comeback, you spend 3 hours working on your craft. They insult your project, and instead of typing a defensive essay, you iterate and improve. 6 months later, they're still stuck in the same place while you've leveled up beyond recognition. That's the power of redirecting defensive energy toward creation. Notice how the most successful people in any field rarely engage with negativity. Not because they're above it, but because they understand opportunity cost. Time spent defending is time not spent advancing. They've done the math, and the math is clear. 1 hour improving your skills is worth more than 100 hours managing your reputation. The skills compound. The reputation management just exhausts you. But here's where it gets interesting. When you stop defending yourself, something unexpected happens. People respect you more, not less. There's a quiet authority that comes from someone who doesn't need to explain themselves. Think about the people you most respect. Do they constantly justify their choices? Do they argue with every critic? Or do they simply do their work and let the results speak? Silence in the face of criticism signals confidence. Not arrogance, confidence. It says, I know my worth and I don't need your validation to confirm it. That's magnetic. People are drawn to that kind of self-assurance because it's rare. Most are desperate for approval, constantly performing for an invisible audience. The person who opts out of that game stands out immediately. Here's something nobody tells you. The criticism that hurts most often comes from people who love you. A stranger's insult is easy to dismiss. But when your parent questions your choices or your friend doubts your direction, that lands differently. This is where non-defense becomes crucial. These relationships matter, so the temptation to defend is strongest. Resist it anyway. Instead of defending, try understanding. Why are they concerned? Usually it's their own fear projecting onto you. Your bold move reminds them of risks they didn't take. Your unconventional path highlights the conventional one they chose. Their criticism often reveals more about their regrets than your mistakes. When you see this, compassion replaces defensiveness. You can acknowledge their concern without adopting it. Something like, I appreciate that you care enough to worry, but I've thought this through is enough. No justification needed, no detailed explanation of your 5-year plan, just acknowledgement and boundary. The hardest criticism to handle isn't external at all. It's the voice in your own head. That internal critic who says you're not good enough, smart enough, ready enough. You can't ignore that voice because it lives inside you. But you also can't defend yourself to it because that creates an internal argument that never ends. What works is observation without engagement. Notice the thought, oh, there's that voice again telling me I'm not ready. Then return to what you were doing. Treat it like background noise, not a conversation partner. The voice doesn't go away, but its power diminishes when you stop treating it as truth. Every time you choose not to defend yourself, you're making a statement about what matters. You're saying my energy is valuable and I choose to invest it in creation, not explanation. That's a radical act in a culture that demands constant justification. Everyone wants to know your reasons, your plans, your qualifications. Refusing to provide them on demand is its own form of power. This doesn't mean you never explain yourself. Context matters. Explaining your vision to a potential partner or collaborator makes sense. That's sharing, not defending. The difference is in the energy. Sharing comes from abundance. I have this idea and I'm inviting you into it. Defending comes from scarcity. Please validate my choice so I can feel okay about it. You can feel which is which. The ultimate freedom is not needing anyone to understand your path. Not your parents, not your friends, not the internet. Just you and your conviction that this is right for you. That doesn't mean you're always right. It means you're willing to be wrong on your own terms rather than right according to someone else's blueprint. That's how you build a life that's actually yours. So when the next criticism comes, and it will, remember this: you have a choice. defend and deplete your energy, or redirect it toward building something undeniable. One path leads to endless arguments. The other leads to results that make arguments irrelevant. The person you become through consistent non-reaction is worth more than winning 1,000 debates. Because that person has learned the rarest skill, staying focused on what matters while the world tries to pull them into what doesn't. That's not just emotional control, that's freedom. And once you taste it, you'll never go back to defending yourself again. The cost is too high and the return too low. Your life's work is waiting. Stop explaining it and start building it. The ancient Stoics weren't teaching detachment from life. They were teaching engagement with what actually moves the needle. Every moment you spend managing perception is a moment stolen from building reality. Your reputation isn't constructed through explanations. It's revealed through patterns of behavior over months and years that no single conversation could establish or destroy. Tomorrow, someone will misunderstand you, maybe deliberately, maybe accidentally. You'll feel that familiar pull to correct them, to set the record straight, to make them see. That's the moment. That's where you choose between the person you've been and the person you're becoming. The old version needs to be understood. The new version needs to be focused. Strategic silence isn't about becoming cold or unreachable. It's about respecting your own time enough to stop spending it on battles that don't matter. The work you're not doing while you're defending yourself, that's the real cost, not your reputation, not what people think, the actual work left undone because you were too busy explaining yourself to people who weren't listening anyway. Your character doesn't need a defense attorney, it needs a builder. Someone who shows up daily, does the work, treats people with integrity, and lets the results speak. That person doesn't have time for endless justification because they're too busy creating something worth noticing. Stop defending. Start building. The rest handles itself.